Wow, so I'm super excited to have you here. I've been wanting to do it for a long time already to connect with you about your amazing job. And maybe I'm going to start by, and finally we're doing it, right? So
Yeah,
it's amazing. So maybe I'm going to start by like introduce yourself a little bit. Tell me what you're up to and what you created for yourself, because I know you have. So yeah.
yeah. So I have helped to create what's called the field of intimacy coordination in film and television. And essentially, what the job of an intimacy coordinator is, we create a safer environment on set for performers whenever they're involved in scenes of nudity, simulated sex, any other type of intimate content. And we're also there to help the director with telling their creative vision and the story and things like that. And so the job often comes down to there's legal aspects to it in terms of like helping performers navigate paperwork. There's pieces related to consent and making sure that people's boundaries are being respected, making sure performers feel like they know everything that they need to know before they say yes to doing something. But there's also a creative aspect to it and helping to make sure that when we're telling stories related to gender and sexuality and things like that, we're doing it in a way that is authentic as possible to the communities that we're portraying on screen.
Wow, that's fascinating. I love it. Like, this is like the aspect that people don't know is happening in the background when they're seeing a movie. They don't know what's happening in the background. And that's like one of the amazing aspects. I'm excited because I met you a few years ago in LA.
Several. Yeah.
Right, in an intro to somatica, and I remember you were like in a fork of deciding what you want to do with your career, and you didn't know, and you really said like, oh, are you gonna, you wanted to have your feelers about the somatica training and see how's that for you. So I'm really kind of curious, like, you took the somatica training, when was it, like?
It was either 2016 or 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you took core in 2016 and then you kind of did additional trainings in
Yeah.
2017. Yeah. So I'm really curious to hear a little bit like how the training helped you shape, like embark on your career, because you did the training and then like right after you had this amazing creative, right?
Yeah, it was just off to the races not long after I finished. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think there is really any day that I'm working that the skill sets that I learned in Somatica don't come into play, because so much of the work that I do is centered around attunement and being able to relate with the performers that I'm working with and reading what's happening for them, not just in terms of what they're saying, but also what's their body saying, what's their vocal tone saying. And that's also a skill that I use with the directors and the producers that I'm working with. And I've been able to develop a reputation for myself as being really good at working with really difficult people. And part
Right.
of that, so I get all the really hard shows, but part of that is because of so many of the skills that I learned in Somatica. And also, I think beyond that is working through my own stuff so that I can hold space for other people. Because I'm sure you remember this, but when I came into Somatica, I had a lot of stuff that I still had to work through. And first module was really hard.
I remember.
Um, it was really hard, but it was such an incredible learning experience and growth experience. And being able to work through your own issues and then come out on the other side and be able to hold space for people, because you can differentiate between when it's like, oh, this is my shit coming up that's affecting my interaction here, and then being able to recognize it and put it on pause and just focus on what's happening and being able to be of service to the other person is just so incredibly key, especially in film and television when we're working in a really fast-paced environment and we don't necessarily have time for people to like process everything that's happening, but we just have to get them through it. There's just a lot of interpersonal skills and things that I've learned that from my time at Somatica that I think are not only applicable to what I do in the film and TV industry, but I think really in any business context would be an asset to anyone.
Yeah, that's so, I'm so excited to hear that. And then you went and you created your own. Tell me a little bit how you finished Somatica and then how did you get into this job?
It's a very Hollywood story, which is that I come from a film and TV family, and so my mom was a production executive at HBO, and she and I were just talking one night, And she was telling me about a show that they had and that they were looking for someone to do this job of intimacy coordinator. And there was one other person basically doing the work at that time. It was incredibly new. No one even knew what the job was really. And my partner, who also took Somatica, and we met there, he was like, he said to my mom, he's like, Amanda could do this job. She'd be great at it. And I also have a background doing advocacy for survivors of sexual assault and also doing advocacy for the queer community and sex positive education work and stuff like that. And so my mom was like, oh, I don't know. And I just finished, I'd finished Somatica several months before. And I was like, just let me submit my resume. I'll get the job on my own. And they called me in for an interview and they were like, you're great. We think your skills and your resume are great and your background. And we love all the coaching that you've done and the education work that you've done. We don't know what this job is, but let's give it a shot. So we basically just figured it out from there. And for anyone who's interested, my first job was Euphoria for HBO, which is notorious for having really intense sex scenes with very young performers and also has a lot of queer storylines going on. So it was a great first job for me. I learned a lot and I got to put all my Somatica training to practice.
I'm so excited. I'm excited. That's amazing. Euphoria is amazing. And I can only imagine you navigating it. I would do a lot to be able to see you do that. You're like, on the wall and see you just like coordinate everyone.
Yeah. So now I started a company where I train other people to become intimacy coordinators. And we're working with SAG-AFTRA, which is the actors union, on trying to join their union because they also represent stunt coordinators and the job of intimacy coordinator is very similar to stunt coordinators. And so it's just really taken off in the last couple of years. And I just feel really honored to have been a part of bringing this job to the film industry and raising awareness about sexuality and gender and how do we have conversations around that and how we have conversations around consent and boundaries in the workplace.
I love it. That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm curious about lots of things, but I'm also curious about you also took the character training, or you kind of, right? Do you want to talk
Yes.
a bit about how that helps you work through those things?
Yeah.
Knowing
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
So I took advanced training. It was probably a year after I did core training. And I think that it's very helpful in terms of particularly when I'm in difficult situations with usually producers or directors and thinking about, okay, what is this person's character archetype and how am I going to choose the way that I interact with them based on that? Because I tend to shift my communication style based on the type of person that I'm interacting with, because some communication styles are not going to work with certain character types and things like that. And I think that's part of what has made me really successful in this industry is kind of having all of that training running in the background informing how I do my job.
Amazing. I love it. Do you feel like sharing a little bit about your private life and your partner, or do you want to keep it?
Sure. I don't know how he feels about it, but I'm happy to.
Oh, we don't have to mention his name.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you want to share a little bit? I know you met him in the training.
We have been together for 3.5 years now, and we met during core training, and it was a little rocky because he was in the process of getting a divorce, and I had a lot of like abandonment wounds and things like that I had to work through, and stuff was a little touch and go with the divorce aspect for a while. And so I think being in Somatica and being able to like do that work together was incredibly helpful to have such a supportive community. And also there's people in the community that I've stayed in touch with since then who have been really helpful whenever he and I are going through things. But I think more importantly, having done the training together, even though obviously that wasn't the intention because we didn't know each other when we started, but both having the language that we learned during the training has been so incredibly helpful for our relationship in terms of having that shared language and being able to communicate with each other more effectively and also be able to be better partners and hold space for one another and talk things through. And I know that I'm a much better person to be in relationship with now than I was beforehand. And I don't know how you go through the training and not be, but I definitely it's definitely, I think, enhanced our ability to relate to one another, and it's something that we both still draw upon even now.
That's wonderful. So excited to hear that. Yeah. So, like, you've been on behind the scenes on different shows, and do you want to mention a few of them? Do you want to share some of them that you've been in the background, or?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of my stuff hasn't come out yet just because there's such a lag between when shows air and when they don't, but or when we shoot and when they air. But in terms of things that I've been on that have already premiered, like I mentioned, Euphoria, I worked on the last season of The Affair for Showtime. I did the L Word reboot for Showtime as well. I've worked on How to Get Away with Murder, which was on ABC. I worked on Carnival Row for Amazon. I've worked on over 25 shows at this point, so it's hard to keep track. We've done a lot.
You have done a lot. You're very busy. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yay. Okay. So, like, so you are managing, you're like behind the scenes and really helping around sexuality. And I'm curious to hear like, we're also working on show, right? The Here She Comes show. And I'm really
Yeah.
curious to hear, what do you feel is needed? Like, what's your take on sex and relationship behind the scenes? And what do you think is kind of, what do we need? What's your take on how should sex look like on TV?
Yeah, I often have conversations with directors and performers about how I think it's really important that we aren't trying to choreograph scenes to look the way that we necessarily think sex like should look. And so one of the things that is actually a conversation in the IC community is often what happens is if you like choreograph sex scenes like and this is at least in my opinion, when you choreograph sex scenes down to like minute details, you often end up with a scene that's just playing towards certain tropes and things like that, and it often looks a lot like other scenes, which can be problematic. And so I always like to see what is the actor's instincts in terms of what they would bring to the scene and kind of letting that shine through, and then if we really need to like fine tune things we can. But like when a performer is doing a simulated orgasm or something like that, I don't like it when someone's trying to like correct them to make it sound like how someone would sound if they were doing like a performative orgasm in porn. It's like there's a lot of more nuance that we can bring to the way that sexuality is portrayed on screen. And so I think I also personally like doing scenes where we're showing things that aren't often shown on screen. And so a lot of the projects I've worked on have to do with queer sexuality and showing different combinations of people and bodies that we don't usually see on screen. And to me, those are the most exciting ones to work on instead of like heteronormative PIV sex scenes, which is most of what we do. But I just think that there's so many different types of human sexual expression to show.
Any gossip for us?
Not really. I mean, it's what's funny is that I think
I'm sure you cannot share it because it's part of your
I've
company.
signed all sorts of NDAs. Yeah, I think I mean, if the one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is that they think that on-screen intimacy, some people think it's like the performers are actually having sex, but that's not the case. It's all simulated.
I want to know, how does it happen? Yes.
Yeah, so they're actually performers are always wearing what are called modesty garments. So for people with penises and testicles, they're basically wearing like a pouch that like ties at the base, like really tight. And for people with vulvas, we give them what are basically like it's like adhesive strapless panty that like goes over like the vulva and then goes like between the butt cheeks and tapes between the butt cheeks. And so all the genitals are covered, and that's also one because we can't make pornography because of obscenity laws related to broadcast, but also two, it's for health and safety reasons for the performers, and also there's union rules involved. But yeah, so genitals are always covered, and it's actually very not sexy to shoot sex scene. It's like the least sexy thing. And especially doing take after take, like the performers are often like exhausted by the end. They're just like completely tapped out. It's so physically and mentally draining. And if you don't like your scene partner, it's even worse. Or if like you don't have the best relationship, like those are the trickiest scenes to navigate. But yeah, I think a lot of people think, oh, they must be so fun. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think most performers feel that way. Maybe some do, but
Yeah, yeah. Super interesting. And do you want to share like something that you felt like super challenging on as an intimacy coordinator? Like maybe a moment that was like most challenging or one of the challenging moments to kind of negotiate?
yeah, I mean, the most challenging situations are when we have like a director or a showrunner, producer, someone like that, trying to pressure a performer to do something they haven't previously agreed to or that they don't want to do. And up until July of last year, there weren't many union rules protecting performers from that, and they've since changed. So we don't have this issue as much anymore because productions aren't allowed anymore to add nudity to a scene for during the 48 hours before the scene is shot, and that's a union rule that's started to protect performers. So now you can't like surprise people and be like, okay, now you're gonna take your shirt off. You can't do that. It's against the union rules. But it used to be that you could. And so those were the most difficult situations, especially because sometimes you'd be having conversations with a performer and they clearly don't want to do something. And I would understand that. And I'd have a conversation with the director or the producer. And sometimes they would just be like, well, fuck you. I don't have to listen to you, and they'd go straight back to the performer to try and coerce them into doing whatever it is that they wanted. And those are the most difficult situations because sometimes there's not much we can do because in terms of like the hierarchy of the industry, an IC is much lower than a producer. And so in those situations we can appeal to other producers, but sometimes there's not a whole lot we can do other than
Right.
report it to the studio.
And do you have like a story, maybe one that you can share? Doesn't no need names unless you want to share, but like it was like, wow, you felt that your work was super impactful and you changed someone's experience on set.
I love working with younger performers who don't have a lot of experience or any experience doing intimacy work because I think it's a really great opportunity to kind of get them started on the right foot in terms of having a good baseline of what does it mean to do intimacy work in a way that is ethical and safe, and they understand what the experience is supposed to be like, and they understand what their rights are, because one of the things that we do is educate the performers on, okay, here are your union rights, this is how the process is going to work, this is what you should expect, these are the conversations we're going to have, this is what's available to you in terms of modesty wear and barriers and things like that. And so I've had a lot of younger performers who I've worked with who are just so incredibly grateful that this position exists and that they have someone that they can turn to ask questions that before they would never have anyone that would be there to field questions, such as like some performers are like, what do I do if I get an erection? Or what do I do if this thing happens? Or do I have to shave my pubic hair? Like, am I actually going to be asked to have sex with someone? Like, these are the questions that like no acting school tells you what
Right.
to expect. No one teaches you, and it's kind of, it's a mirror of how like when it comes to sex in society and stuff like that, a lot of the time people, you're not really taught a whole lot of practical information about what to expect with your first sexual experience unless you're very lucky to be part of a sex positive community or have parents who are open to talking about those sorts of things. So I think it's really great to get first time performers off to the right start and be able to create a good experience for them.
That's awesome. Wow, wonderful. So, any final words? I'm happy. Of course, we're going to share your website here. You want to say where people can find you and
You can find my company, Intimacy Professionals Association, at intimacyprofessionalsassociation.com. We are also on Instagram. Our username is at Intimacy Coordination.
Oh, wonderful. So I just want to say that I'm super proud of you and
You.
so excited to follow your career and like remember you were like, shall I do medical school?
I'm
And
so glad I'm not in medical school right now, given the pandemic.
yeah, it's true. And like really like you're like thinking about your path and you kind of found your path that really feels like a good fit for you, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much for joining me here. It was a real pleasure for me to connect with you and see.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.